Braden and Tali Waller on the Voice of My Beloved podcast. Glad you joined us today. We're switching roles a little bit today. I'm hosting Tali because Tali is going to be sharing her testimony. So I'm looking forward to that. I've heard it a few times, but I'm looking forward to hearing it again.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to be giving bits and pieces of my story growing up as an encouragement that that God is working in your life, and he spoke to me through my life and leaded and directed me, and I got to learn all kinds of things. It wasn't all pretty, but praise God, he had his hand on me the whole time. So yeah, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about that.
Yes, before we jump into that, we're going to just announce that we have the Sukkot registration open at this point. So if you want to find out more about that, go to the loveandpurity.com website.
Yep. loveandpurity.com/Sukkot.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can register there. And
yeah, you can find out all the details about that. And we're really looking forward to it. We're calling a Sukkot of Ascent, or Sukkot of Ascent. And yes, we're just looking forward to going up in the purposes of God. And yes, pressing toward the goal, as Paul said, pressing toward the goal for the upward call of God in Messiah Yeshua.
Yep.
This is what we're called to do, is to go upward. Our culture is going backwards. We want to go up. We want to go up in God's purposes.
Yep. Yeah, I also wanted to just remind you all out there that if you have not signed up for updates for Love and Purity updates, you probably want to go hop on the website, www.loveandpurity.com, and click on the subscribe or the update button. I forget what it says, but you click on there and give us your email address, and that way you can kind of stay informed. We're trying not to send out loads of emails. We're just doing like one every couple weeks or something like that, 2 or 3 weeks. But yeah, then you can keep updated about what's happening here in Missouri. We've got some other plans that are in the works that hopefully we're going to announce here soon. So yeah.
So Tali, we want to hear from you. Tell us your testimony.
Oh man. Okay. It's like, how do you tell it's a lot of story to tell, but I just picked out a couple things in my life, just moments in time that stick out to me through my growing up. This is my testimony of my single years, kind of like as a young person, as I grew up, like how God directed me and the things that he showed me in different seasons of life. So it might not be quite as orderly as Braden's was last week. He's a very outlined kind of I might be winging it more this time.
Oh, just let it fly. We look forward to hearing it.
Yeah. So I'm going to start out just talking about my my home. I grew up in my parents. They both got married when they were older. My dad was actually 39. And my mom was 29 or 30, I think. And so anyways, they were both older. And so when they got married, and they started having children right away, and they just loved it. They were so happy to be married and have children and stuff. And so they just spent everything just investing in us, reading Bible stories. And it was a really sweet home as a child. And so I just remember during one of the Bible reading sessions in my childhood, I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. I had this this realization of the weight of sin, or like the weight of I guess how big of a deal it was to walk without repentance, without being forgiven. And so I remember as a child just really crying to my parents and just asking them, well, what does this mean? What do I have to do? And so that was a really big point in my life. I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. And so, yeah, I grew up, went to Christian school, which I'm really thankful that my parents sent me there. And I went to Christian school, and I had 2 younger sisters that came along. And my next sister down from me, she tended to be a little bit feisty. And so, we kind of tussled a lot, as little ones. And I remember in Christian school, they would have you write down prayer requests a lot, like in different books and stuff like that. It was just a regular part of the routine. And I I wrote almost every time that there was prayer request, I would write some, and then I would always include in that, I pray that I would get along with my sisters. Mm-hmm. And it was like my number one prayer. And I did that like all through my younger years and stuff. And so it's so interesting to me to look back at that because right now, and even growing up, it happened shortly after that my sisters just became my best friends. And we were all so close, and our family, me and my parents were just so close. All of us were just so close knitted together. And, we didn't always do everything right. And there was a lot of, holes in the method of how we kind of went forward. But that love that we had for each other, I think, was a huge part of keeping me as I grew up. And so, so I want to really encourage all of you out there that are walking out these single years, that you're in your family, if you're growing up, even if you're not living at home. I feel like this is such a huge part of life as a single person, is to invest in the ministry of, there's a ministry of investing in your siblings, in your parents. There's nothing that grieves me more than to run into a family where the sisters don't hardly talk, or, I had sisters, so I don't get the brother thing really, but it just is, it's so painful to see sisters not get along, just because I'm like, man, you don't know what you have. Like this person is she's living life with you. Like this is and so I was the oldest. And so I really took it on as a responsibility that I was to really reach out and invest in my sisters and love them. And so I feel very blessed in that. They're still my closest friends in all the world. And such a huge encouragement to me. God has used them so hugely in my life, and just encouraging me and helping me. We all have different strengths and weaknesses and different giftings, and I've been so blessed as they've balanced out a lot of my giftings and weaknesses and stuff too. They've kind of helped balance in those areas, which is a huge blessing. So that was family life. Yeah. And so then, let me see. Yeah. So growing up, I think my parents really made it a priority to keep God in the center. We were very connected to our church. I joined the worship team with my 9-year-old sister when I was 12, and we started singing on the worship team and stuff, which was an amazing experience. I'm so thankful for that time that God gave me, just being able to be on the worship team and learn how to play music together. I grew up in a really small church, and it was so awesome because there was so much opportunity to love each other and to be able to grow and train in things like being on the worship team and stuff. So I love all my worship team people that I grew up with and stuff. They're still some of my best friends. Okay, so then we got into teenage years, okay? And so when I got older, and I'm sure that I've probably told bits and pieces of this before, and so, it's some of it is repeated, and some of it there's another part of my testimony I'm going to be telling later too. So, you can stay tuned for that. But so my teenage years is when I started kind of branching out. I went to Christian high school the first couple years, and that was really good. But I was also part of the couple different youth groups, and it was a very tumultuous kind of season in my life. I started getting much more into the influence of peers and stuff. I started listening to a lot more secular things, movies and TV and stuff, which I've already explained was really not a good influence on me. But praise God, I was able to maintain a really good relationship with my family through all of that. And I kept on the worship team, and I really think those things that always kind of pulled me back. I was really blessed to have those things that I didn't kind of branch out too far. It's kind of an interesting thing as I've looked back on things. I was very creative. I dyed my hair like so many different colors. And I'm not talking about pink or purple or anything, but I had it was from blonde to black, red, any natural color you can imagine out there. And I had it cut every which way you could, bangs and long and short. And the shortest I had was actually probably only an inch or two long when I was a senior in high school. And so I had this very creative kind of flair, and I wore...
You were easily bored.
Right. And I still am. I just have to find other ways to interest myself. Easily bored. I actually even... So I went to the first 2 years in Christian high school, and I transferred over to public high school. And I actually I was involved in these theater productions, and I actually wore wigs from my theater production in the class. I'd wear it to school. It was pretty comical. Everyone knew who I was, even though I was very shy in public school, in high school. Hardly anyone really knew me really well, but everyone knew of me. I made a mark on that place. And so, so I actually
Nobody else was wearing wigs? No. You were the only one that wore wigs?
Yeah, shockingly. Yeah, and I, wore all kinds of crazy clothes and stuff too. So anyways, it was an interesting season of life. And so during this season, I'm also going to youth group, as I mentioned, and stuff, and I'm really big part of the church, and really close to my family. And so at this season, I really started reaching out in my immaturity to the needy people around me. And that it was too much for me as a young person, and it ended up really taking me down. And so my youth leaders saw that I was struggling, and they actually came to my rescue and really started ministering to my friends and stuff that I was trying to reach out to in my young state. So that was really a blessing. But the youth culture is something I'd like to do like a whole podcast on, just like what that's like. I was blessed. I was really blessed with some godly youth leaders, and we had a really good, on fire youth group. Now, how many of us made it out to this point? I'm not sure where everyone is in their path right now, but yeah, it was a blessing to have. I'm really thankful for those youth leaders, and a lot of them were part of the worship team as well. Okay, so during this season, I'm having a lot of people, because I'm kind of out there. There's a lot of people that would approach me. Like I said, grew up with my church members and stuff all my life and stuff. So the pastor would come up and make a comment every once in a while about the way I was dressed. My dad, when I was going through all my crazy hair stuff, he hung a picture on the wall. He actually just taped it up there, and it was a picture of me with my natural hair. And every time people would come into my house, he'd bring them over to this picture, and he'd go, "This is what she's supposed to look like." And then, a lot of stuff in the modesty realm. I was in theater at this point, where nothing is holy, and I remember going outside once to greet some friends from church. They were coming over for some gathering, and I went out there in these really high heels, and I remember my dad approaching me and being like, "Please don't wear those out there." And he never was forceful. He never was, real, and none of them were. They all were just lovingly trying to give me little tips and stuff. And I had a pastor come when I was getting really into the movies and stuff like that. A pastor was talking to me about it, and he was like, "Tali, you really have to be careful." It was actually a TV show that I was watching. He said, you really have to be careful with what you're watching. And he explained to me how an apple seed has just a little bit of poison, but if you take bunches and bunches of apple seeds, that it turns into a lot of poison. And so something that might look harmless to begin with, it's actually really bad for you and stuff. And so I remember all of these little tips and little bits of advice as a teenager. Unfortunately, it's you think you know better, or they just don't understand me and I'm just too creative. That's what I thought, that I'm just an artist. All these people just don't get me.
I have a question. The TV show that you're watching, is that the one you forgot what you look like when you're watching it? No,
no, that wasn't too bad of a show. Okay. I mean, it was, but
okay. There was one TV show that Tali watched. She said she forgot what she looked like. She'd watched it so much.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. There's another show that it's a comedy skit thing that I actually, it's crazy, but I actually went to the live thing up in New York City when I lived up there later on. It was a crazy thing. Anyways, so yeah, ignored all these bits and pieces of advice that people were trying to help me with and stuff. So the encouragement is, embrace the counsel that God has put in your life. It does not mean that you have to obey every little, criticism and stuff that's around you. But I think there's a blessing in allowing other people to speak into your life. I think there's so much good fruit that comes from that. And I really feel like if I would have listened to that advice, if I would have listened to those comments, that I'd be in a different place. I would have been able to escape a lot of the problems that I ended up in. So yeah, that's a big encouragement, is to just embrace those voices that God sends to you. Okay. So as I said, I'm on the worship team, and I'm also doing all of these theater productions and stuff. This is my teenage years in high school. And I was pretty well known, not only for the way I dressed, but also because I was the lead in the musical both years that I was there. And so, everyone came to the musical and stuff and got to know me through that. And so I also did a lot of concerts and stuff like that in the school. I was part of the choir and had solos and stuff like that. And so it was kind of an interesting thing. I was in line for graduation ceremony, and this girl that I did not know very well at all. Oh, first I have to tell you, a couple days before this, there's this thing that high school does where it's called I forget what the name of it now, but it's like a senior worship or church service for the people, like the seniors that want to go to this church service. It's like the last one or whatever. And so I led worship at that church service. And so most of the class had come and stuff. And so a couple days later, I'm walking in line in graduation with this lady this girl that was in class with me, who I'd hardly ever spoken to before. She's like a popular girl. She was just one of those people I hadn't really formed a really good relationship with. But as we were waiting in line, she turned around to me and she said, during that worship the other day, she said, you sounded different when you sang that song. And I was like, really? And she said, yeah. She said, there was like just something really different about the way you sounded. And I really liked it, she said. And so it always stood out to me, and just how I feel like it was God kind of just speaking to me, saying, this is what I created you for, is to worship. Like, I've given you this gifting to bring glory to me. And so that was a big little marker. So I'm in college, and I'm not in college, I'm in high school, and I'm praying about what to do for college. And I wasn't sure if I should do music or art or theater. I wasn't sure which thing to kind of go after. And so there was a part of me, like, I'm part of this really on fire youth group, even though I'm watching these horrible movies and stuff like that. I'm part of like this really big part of the church and the youth group and stuff. And so I I'm in my senior year, and I'm like thinking, I'm telling my parents, I really don't know if I want to go to college. I really want to do ministry of some sort. I want to do like just audition for plays or something, or do something. I don't really want to go to college. And so my parents were like, I don't know, we feel like you should go to college. And so they started talking to my art teachers and my music teachers and stuff, asking them what they thought. And my art teacher said, well, I think she should go to school for fashion design. She really, dresses interesting. I can tell she really likes clothes, and she's, she's good at it. So I think that's what she should do. And so my parents or my mom, we talked about it. And so I was like, okay, fashion design, that kind of, I was not really expecting to do something like that. And so I was like, I don't know. And so I actually was in the midst of all of this. I'm not like living this perfectly holy life in any way at this time, but I was praying, and I love how God speaks to you in where you're at. And I still appreciate that to this day, that he still looks at me in compassion and speaks to me in my state, in whatever spirituals, as we knock and as we seek him, he speaks to us. And so, it's not always obvious, and it's not always right away, and it's not always in the way that, a lot of times it's when we're looking back that we can see it, how he was speaking to us. But in this time I was praying about going to school for fashion design, and I'm thinking, how could I ever do ministry with fashion design? It just doesn't make any sense. I couldn't see doing it. And so I started praying about it one day, and I was like, God, just show me, am I supposed to go to school for fashion design? And I opened up the Bible to read that day, and I opened right up to this verse that was right up to the story of Tabitha in the New Testament. And Tabitha, which sounds a lot like Talitha, my name, Tabitha had died, and all of her friends ran to Peter saying, you've got to come help. They're explaining to him, she made us all these clothes. And they just loved her so much, and they're talking about how she made us all these clothes and stuff. And so I read that, and I felt like that was God speaking to me saying, there can be ministry within fashion design. Now, I think it's kind of funny at this point, because I would never encourage someone to go to school for fashion design. But I really felt like he was leading me to do that. And so that's what I ended up doing. I went to school for fashion design and ended up in New York City. And that's where I met my Israeli friend, who I ended up going to Israel with. And so which she was a really big part of my testimony, just learning. She's Jewish. She lived in a Jewish house. I lived in a house with her and a couple of other Israelis in New York City. And she taught me the Hebrew alphabet. And I just really grew an appreciation for the Jewish people in this season. So anyways, it was a really big, that was a really big part of things. And so even though I would not encourage anyone to go to school for fashion design, it was a part of the story that God kind of led me in. And
which is the reason you actually ended up going to Israel.
Yeah.
You went with this friend of yours.
Yeah, because she's the one that that invited me. So I just that's just a little bit of my story. All during those college years in New York City, I came home every weekend to be on the worship team, and I stayed connected to my family. And so, I'm so glad that God kind of had me anchored, because it was a lot of craziness. I was exposed to a whole lot of yuck up there in New York City.
New York City is not a righteous place.
No. And I was also blessed. I actually found a nice little Bible study up there down the street from the school, and so that was nice. During the week, I would go there. That was nice. But yeah, it's a rough place to be, and I think it's definitely a ministry opportunity. But I was not ready for that particular ministry at that time. So. Yeah, so I think that's a lot of just the little snippets and stuff. I do want to say, okay, so because I've given part of this testimony before, so I'm trying not to repeat too much. But yeah, I did New York City, and then I went down after I graduated from New York City. I actually went and spent 3 months down in the West Indies, and with my uncle and aunt, had a really sweet time with the family down there. But it was the first time I was disconnected from my church and family, and it was pretty rough for me. I wasn't ready. And so when I came back, I was really, really spiritually just really down. And so I was really praying for a breakthrough of some sort. And that's when I went to Israel the first time. And that's when my whole life changed, because I came back from Israel and I started seeing for the first time all of these places where I was allowing influences into my life that were totally unproductive in my relationship with God, and totally just keeping me far from him instead of drawing me closer. And so right after I come back from Israel and I'm going through this major change of heart, is when a friend from one of my youth group leaders, actually a friend who had been married and had a couple children by this time, she approached me about modesty and gave me a book. And I was just talking about how all these people had tried to say things before and I ignored it to my own detriment. And then when she came, though, my heart was ready. And God, it definitely what was it? It was hard on my pride, but because God had put this teachable spirit in me, by then I just wanted to do his will. I was able to listen to what my friend had to say and look into things. And so I'm so thankful, that God, brought that into my life. And then it's amazing, once I started, closing the door to all that other yuck stuff, how he started opening the door for all this good influence and things that are going to lead and direct me, to this place where I'm at now. Just different influences like Above Rubies and the Wallers, the Hayuvel, married to this wonderful man now, but that God used a journey home really big in my life too. So all of that is a part of the story. And I just feel very blessed. And, looking back now, I used to, when I first came into all this stuff and just realized all the yuck that I had exposed myself to, I just became ashamed of my past. And I was I would just wanted to kind of hide it or forget about it. But I feel like as God's brought healing to me and has allowed me to understand his forgiveness, he's allowed me to look back and see the beautiful ways that he spoke to me and led me even in the midst of some of that stuff.
The redemptive work he did.
The redemptive work, yeah. And I feel like it's all a part of the story, And so even a couple years ago, I was, I'd kind of forgotten about the whole thing where God spoke to me saying, clothing can be your ministry. And a couple years ago, I remembered that again. And I was like, I think God was really speaking to me. And so, so I feel like that's still a part of his plan, because
we even designed some wedding dresses, your own wedding dress and a few others.
Yeah. And that's so fun. But I also even today, there's such a need for the voice of modesty and stuff. And so I don't know what God will do with that eventually, but,
and you can look amazing. Yeah. And still dress modestly.
Yes. Yeah.
You don't have to be fuddy-duddy.
No, not fuddy-duddy. No. I think most people probably still wouldn't dress exactly like me. So I still have a little bit of a creative flair. But I think it's fun. I like talking about clothes, and I still like clothes a lot. Godly clothes, holy clothes. But yeah, I think that's where I'm going to wrap up.
Tali and I's story is a true example of opposites attract, because we came from very different backgrounds, but we really love each other.
Yeah.
And can appreciate the journey that God brought us on.
Yeah, and that helps us understand the world in a greater way, right? Different people and stuff.
Right.
So, yeah, it's good. God is good.
Yes.
Plans are good.
Yes. This is Brayden and Tali reminding you to listen to the voice of your beloved bridegroom. He is coming quickly.